Meet Aria Fontaine, a fearless aerialist on a mission to find her missing sister, Allegra, who vanished under mysterious circumstances a year ago. When Aria receives a cryptic invitation to join the legendary Gilded Circus, she leaps at the chance, unaware that she's about to uncover a web of corruption spun by the enigmatic Nikolai Orlov. As the stakes rise, so does the tension. From heart-pounding performances under the desert sun to intense showdowns in the shadows, every moment brings Aria closer to the truth and closer to danger. Will Aria expose Nikolai's sinister plans and rescue her sister? Can love and loyalty triumph over greed and deceit? Curious? You should be. The greatest show is just beginning. I'm your host, Josh, and it's an absolute pleasure to share this story with you. Aria Fontaine had always believed that the night sky was friendlier than the ground beneath her feet. Up there, suspended on a thin bar of metal and leather straps, she felt more certain of herself, almost fearless. But tonight, a shiver of anxiety crackled through her muscles as she hung upside down from her modest homemade trapeze. The spotlight from the old barn rafters wasn't half as bright as she'd have liked, and the rowdy applause from the small-town crowd wasn't quite enough to drown out the creeping dread inside her mind. She completed a neat somersault and gripped the bar once more, focusing on the routine she'd practiced over and over. Her arms felt steady, even if her heart did not. This should have been a glorious moment. The finale of her local performance, a chance to raise a few extra dollars from eager neighbors who saw her as a hometown star. But all she could think of was her sister Allegra, vanished a year ago after joining some mysterious traveling show. Aria soared with the final swing, releasing the bar in a flourish of skill, landing squarely on the small wooden platform. Cheers filled the rickety barn. She offered a quick bow, forcing a bright, if tense, smile. She wanted to be gracious toward the people who'd shown up, but an ache in her chest reminded her that Allegra had never seen her perform these advanced moves. They'd always promised each other they'd share that moment of triumph. Now, only a ringing absence remained. She stepped down from the platform, sweat cooling on her neck, and weaved through the modest backstage area, no more than a corner crowded with crates and hay bales. She paused to wipe her forehead with the back of her hand, trying to quell a pang of worry. Her best friend and occasional stage assistant, Claire, bounded over, squealing, "That was fantastic. Your split leap at the end, pure magic." Aria mustered a hollow smile. "Thanks. Next time I'll try not to dislocate a shoulder in the process." Claire laughed, oblivious to Aria's deeper concerns. "Hey, it got you a standing ovation. That's what matters." She wanted to agree and share the excitement, yet her thoughts always circled back to her sister. Allegra had once been the risk-taker, the one who taught Aria how to fly on a trapeze in the first place. Her older sister's letters used to brim with stories of the Gilded Circus, rumored to be the most extravagant traveling spectacle on Earth. But those letters had abruptly stopped, leaving only silent questions behind. Aria packed up her trapeze bar, coil of rope, and a few personal items. She placed them in the battered duffel she'd used for performances ever since she was a teenager. After the audience drifted away, she lingered under the barn's fairy lights, reluctant to face another sleepless night haunted by Allegra's absence. She decided to head outside for a breath of cooler air. Stars blinked overhead, and the moon cast pale shadows across the gravel parking lot. A hush had settled. Even the chirping of crickets seemed muffled. For a moment, she let her gaze wander skyward, finding a flicker of comfort in the constellations. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. Whirling around, she found a tall figure standing near the barn entrance. She clutched her duffel, alarm flashing through her veins. But the figure stepped forward into a sliver of moonlight, revealing itself to be a slight, older man in a crisp suit that looked terribly out of place in a rural town. His wire-rimmed glasses and measured stance gave the impression of a lawyer, or maybe some bizarre corporate recruiter. "Aria Fontaine?" The man's voice was soft, almost whispery, but it carried a strange authority. She nodded, pressing her lips together in a tight line. "Yes?" He reached inside his suit jacket. Every nerve in her body tensed, but he simply drew out an envelope, white, with embossed gold filigree. "This is for you." Aria stared, her pulse thumping. "What is it?" The man gave a slight bow. "An invitation. The Gilded Circus has expressed interest in your talent." Time slowed. Her breath caught in her throat at the mention of the Gilded Circus. She gingerly took the envelope, half disbelieving. This can't be right. The Gilded Circus is..." She fought to keep her voice steady. "They're almost mythical. They don't just scout random aerialists from nowhere towns. "I assure you, Miss Fontaine, this is quite real," the man replied. "My employer has personally invited you to participate in a closed audition. Details are inside." She looked down at the envelope, its edges gleaming under the moon. A swirl of curiosity and fear churned in her stomach. Why me? There must be thousands of better aerialists out there. The man offered a thin smile, but his eyes remained unreadable. "We know about your sister, Allegra Fontaine. She was a star performer." A subtle pause. "Until she was no longer with us." Aria's heart hammered. Do you know what happened to her?" The man didn't answer directly. "Come to the audition. Then all your questions can be answered." He tipped his hat. Where had that hat come from? And stepped back into the shadows. Within seconds, he vanished, as though consumed by the moonlit darkness. She stood frozen in place, envelope trembling in her hand. The Gilded Circus. The name that had haunted her dreams since Allegra disappeared. The place that might hold the answers she'd been craving. She felt a drop of sweat roll down her temple, or maybe it was a tear. It was impossible to tell in the hush of the night. Slowly, she slid a trembling finger under the envelope's seal and lifted the flap. Inside, the letter glowed with ornate script. "Miss Aria Fontaine, you are cordially invited to audition for the Gilded Circus, the world's premier traveling spectacle. Please present yourself at the indicated location and time. Your performance will determine if you will join us on our upcoming tour. We look forward to witnessing your aerial artistry." It was signed simply, Nikolai Orlov, Director of Operations. Her heart sank at the mention of a name she'd never heard from Allegra's letters. Allegra had spoken of a charismatic ringmaster, but not of this Nikolai. Beneath the letter was a small card with directions to a remote field a few hundred miles away. No date, no mention of Allegra, just the stark instructions and a swirl of gold ink around the edges. Her gut twisted with equal parts dread and exhilaration. She whirled around, half expecting the strange man to reappear. The barn was empty, except for the faint glow of leftover string lights. In the distance, Claire's voice called her name, probably wondering why she hadn't returned to the dressing area. Aria pressed the invitation to her chest, inhaling the cool night air. The Gilded Circus was no ordinary sideshow. Allegra's last letter had been full of awe. The shimmering tents, the exotic locations, the endless wealth on display. She'd written about a certain tension too, a sense that not all was what it seemed. Then, the letters had stopped abruptly, leaving Aria to fear the worst. Now, the circus was calling to her. It felt like an impossible coincidence. Had they found out she was Allegra's sister? Was it a lure? Or a genuine chance to discover the truth and maybe bring Allegra home? Returning indoors, she tucked the envelope into her duffel, out of sight. Claire rushed over, eyeing Aria's pale expression. "Hey, you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Aria forced a shaky breath. She debated telling Claire everything but held back, not wanting to alarm her friend just yet. "I'm okay," she lied. "Just a bit dizzy after the performance." Claire frowned, but the concern melted from her eyes at Aria's faint smile. "Well, if you're sure. There's a slice of pie in the main house if you want to join me. Payment for your stellar act, courtesy of old Mrs. Wilkins." Aria tried to return a semblance of normalcy with a warm nod. "Thanks. I'll catch up to you soon." As Claire left, Aria slid onto a wooden bench in the makeshift backstage. Her heart pounded, thoughts swirling like a maelstrom. The Gilded Circus invitation sparked a glimmer of hope that she might uncover what happened to Allegra. But it also radiated danger, as if she'd stepped onto a wire suspended over a canyon with no safety net below. Still, she couldn't deny the pull. The promise of seeing the same tents Allegra had once described. The possibility of crossing paths with her sister's footprints. Maybe unraveling the secrets locked away behind that gilded facade. She couldn't ignore it. She rose, duffel slung over her shoulder, stepping out into the warm summer night. Every instinct whispered that this was the path she must take. If the Gilded Circus held the answers, no matter how terrifying, Aria was determined to find them. And perhaps, just perhaps, bring Allegra home again. The next morning, Aria couldn't remember drifting off to sleep. The barn's makeshift dressing room had seemed to close in on her with a million what-ifs swirling through her thoughts. Yet sunrise found her throwing a duffel bag into her old sedan and setting out on a lonely stretch of highway. The invitation practically burned a hole in her pocket. She checked and rechecked the embossed lettering, half expecting it to vanish like some conjurer's trick. Each mile she drove felt like stepping into an unknown world, one where her sister might be waiting, or where Aria's worst fears would be confirmed. The further she got from home, the more questions surfaced. What if Allegra left willingly and just cut ties? What if she's found a new life and never tried to contact me? Or what if something terrible happened? By the time she reached the coordinates, a barely marked exit onto a dirt road, her shoulders were stiff, and anxiety had replaced her morning coffee. She turned down the rutted path, dust swirling around her, and nearly swallowed her heart when she came upon a massive gleaming arch. Metal sculptures of winged horses and trapeze artists twisted overhead, forming a gateway to a spread of lavish tents. The place was an otherworldly carnival of color: gold, crimson, royal purple. Huge flags flapped in the wind, each bearing the swirling emblem of a trapeze silhouette crowned by a gilded flourish. If Arya's hometown barn show was a flickering candle, this was a roaring bonfire. She pulled into a makeshift parking lot lined with expensive cars, sleek, glossy machines that probably cost more than her entire street back home. Her battered sedan drew curious glances from a few stagehands. One of them, a stocky man in a black t-shirt, gestured her forward. She rolled down her window, and he pointed her toward a sign that read, "Talent Check-In." Her pulse pounded. Stepping out, Arya tried to smooth down her worn leggings, painfully aware of how out of place she looked. The sign led her toward a reception desk beneath a vibrant canopy. A petite woman with jewel-encrusted glasses greeted her with businesslike efficiency. "Name and specialty?" the woman asked, barely looking up from her tablet. "Arya Fontaine," she managed, voice tight. "Aerial acrobat." The woman scanned a list, then nodded. "Yes, you're expected. Personally added by Mr. Orloff." She handed Arya a small badge. "Tent 7 is your orientation. Follow the golden arrows." Arya's stomach fluttered at the mention of Nikolai Orloff, the man in the letter. He's the one who found me, or at least orchestrated that messenger. He must know Allegra too. She swallowed, forcing her feet into motion. Tent 7 was set in the far corner of the grounds, discreet but equally lavish. The interior had rows of chairs, a small platform, and swirling patterns of light overhead. Several other hopefuls waited inside: tumblers, a contortionist, a dancer with razor-straight posture, and a pair of aerialists who looked like they could be professional gymnasts. The tension in the air was thick, everyone acutely aware that they might be on the brink of something huge. Finding a spare chair, Arya perched on its edge, duffel clutched against her legs. She scanned the group, her pulse racing. Could one of them know what happened to Allegra? Could she have trained with these people? Suddenly the room fell silent. A charismatic figure strode onto the small platform, his presence electric. He wore a rich velvet tailcoat, a deep midnight blue, and carried a polished cane. Dark curls framed his sharp features. He flashed a dazzling smile that radiated confidence. "Welcome," the man said, voice resonating through discreet speakers. "I'm Lucian Moretti, ringmaster of the Gilded Circus." His gaze swept across the seated performers. "This is no ordinary circus. Only those with exceptional skill and the willingness to embrace our world can join us." A ripple of excitement mingled with apprehension. Arya's heart thudded, recalling Allegra's starry-eyed descriptions of the ringmaster. This must be him, the one she admired. Luke continued, "We'll audition each of you individually. If you demonstrate the talent and spirit we require, you'll be invited to travel with us for the season. If not, you'll be shown the exit. No hard feelings." He paused, eyes gleaming. "But I have high hopes. Our director of operations, Nikolai Orloff, personally selected some of you based on glowing recommendations." Arya caught her breath. So he's the ringmaster, but Nikolai is the puppet master behind the scenes. She clenched her fists, imagining how close Allegra must have been to these people before she vanished. After a few more instructions, Luke stepped down from the platform. Assistants guided each performer to a side hall containing apparatuses for warm-ups. Arya followed, fingers shaking around the straps of her duffel. If you are enjoying the story, help us by subscribing to the channel. And please leave a comment to let us know what you're thinking about the story. This is of huge importance to us. The warm-up space was huge, a vaulted interior lined with rigging, thick mats, and overhead bars. Before she could start rehearsing, a smooth voice spoke at her shoulder. "Miss Fontaine?" She turned to see Luke, cane in hand, regarding her with what might have been a flicker of curiosity. "You're up first." She inhaled, then nodded. No time to think, just do what she did best. "Yes, sir." He smiled, the corners of his eyes softening. "Call me Luke. Sir makes me feel old." She managed a tense laugh. "Right, Luke." He gestured to the trapeze rigging. "Whenever you're ready." An assistant hoisted the bar to a comfortable height. Arya slipped off her jacket, hands trembling. She forced a few deep breaths, recalling Allegra's old advice. Focus on the moment, not on the fear. Then she sprang up, gripping the bar. Every muscle in her body hummed with adrenaline. "For you, Allegra." She launched into a practiced routine, letting the trapeze swing her aloft. The tense hush pressed in as she flipped backward, hooking her knees in a flawless catch. Her body remembered the timing, the angles, the release. She soared with a mid-air twist, then caught the bar again. A subdued cheer rippled from onlookers. When she finished, arms quivering, she landed on the mat. Luke offered a quiet nod of approval. "Excellent. You've clearly honed your technique." His eyes sparkled, but Arya also sensed a layer of caution. "I look forward to seeing more." She realized she was breathing heavily, both from exertion and the swirl of emotion. Would impressing Luke also draw the attention of Nikolai Orlov? Probably, she thought with a tightening in her chest. That was the best chance she had to get answers about Allegra. She needed them to notice her. He offered her a hand to help her stand, and she took it, trying to hide how clammy her palms were. His cane tapped lightly on the floor. "Welcome to the Gilded Circus, Arya. If you decide to stay, things will move quickly." Her heart thundered. "I'm ready. I have to be." From the corner of her eye, she saw another assistant exit the hall, whispering into a headset. Nikolai's watchers, maybe. A quiver of anxiety threaded through her, but a tiny flame of determination also burned brighter. If the Gilded Circus was her only route to Allegra's trail, she would face any danger that came with it. She nodded at Luke again, mustering composure. "Thank you." He tipped his head. "We'll speak soon." As he moved on to check the next hopeful, Arya exhaled in a rush. The audition was over, but the real test was just beginning. Tension churned under every breath. She could feel the invisible current swirling behind the circus's dazzling facade. "I'm coming for you, Allegra," she vowed silently. "I won't stop until I find out what happened." Evening light poured through the high windows of the practice hall, creating golden beams that caught the dust in the air. Arya's heartbeat hammered in her chest, but the adrenaline high from her earlier audition hadn't subsided. Her arms still buzzed with the memory of gripping the trapeze, each muscle recalling the graceful arc that had propelled her into midair. She was used to the thrill of performing, but now there was a sharp edge to it, fueled by the secret quest to uncover her sister's fate. After the audition, the Gilded Circus staff had ushered her, along with a handful of other hopefuls, into a quieter alcove for administrative logistics. Arya signed her name on a stack of papers that felt both official and unsettling. Disclaimers about inherent risks, confidentiality clauses hinting at proprietary illusions, and the occasional paragraph so dense with legalese she could barely parse it. Yet her pen moved with unwavering resolve. If this is what it takes to find Allegra, so be it. When she finished, an assistant pointed her down a corridor toward a costume-fitting station. Arya barely had time to process the swirl of new responsibilities before she stepped through the cloth-draped entrance. Inside, a team of seamstresses fluttered around, measuring, pinning, and stitching shimmering fabrics. Sequins glinted under overhead lamps. The sight took her breath away. The Gilded Circus spared no expense in visual splendor. But Arya's thoughts were half elsewhere, replaying the moment she'd locked eyes with Luke Moretti, the ringmaster. Something about his calm confidence and the shadow behind his bright smile tugged at her curiosity. He must have known Allegra. Did they share a friendship or something deeper? The unspoken questions circled in her mind. She was halfway through a new costume fitting, her arms raised as a tailor pinned a gold-trimmed leotard, when a smooth voice turned her attention to the tent flap. Camilla Salazar, the illusionist, swept inside, eyes sparkling. She wore a sleek black bodysuit adorned with small crystals that caught the lamplight. "You must be Arya," she said with a friendly grin. "The new aerialist everyone's buzzing about." Arya's cheeks heated at the compliment. "I'm not sure about buzzing, but thanks. And you're Camilla, right? I saw your name on the audition roster." "That's me. Master of Illusions, or so they claim," Camilla replied, winking at the tailor, who smiled fondly. Then her gaze returned to Arya, voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Word travels fast around here. Your routine was pretty spectacular." Luke looked impressed. Arya shrugged, mind flashing to the ringmaster's approving nod. "He seems Nice, she offered carefully. A swirl of excitement mingled with caution in her stomach. Camilla bit back a knowing smirk. Oh, Luke is more than nice. He truly cares about the performers. But he's also under a lot of pressure. She lowered her voice. This place isn't just about glitz and glam. There's a lot going on beneath the surface. A prickle of unease ran through Arya's spine. She thought of the confidentiality clauses she'd just signed, Allegra's vanished letters, and the looming presence of Nikolai Orlov. I believe it, she said softly. I'm just here to do my best. Camilla's eyes flickered with sympathy, as though she sensed Arya's unease. If you ever need someone to talk to, find me. We illusions folks see more than people think. With that cryptic remark, she patted Arya's shoulder and breezed out, leaving the faint scent of jasmine in her wake. A couple of hours later, Arya found herself back in the practice hall. This time, the place hummed with evening energy. Dancers stretching, jugglers tossing clubs in intricate patterns, and a daring fire eater rehearsing in a far corner. Somewhere overhead, a contortionist tested new apparatus riggings designed by Zhang Wei, whose name Arya had heard in hushed, respectful tones. Everyone prepared for the next big performance, which Arya had learned was coming sooner than expected. She slipped onto the central practice mat to stretch, recalling each step of her audition routine. The minutes ticked by, and her mind drifted to Allegra, wishing she could have witnessed Arya's progress. A clench of anger formed in her chest at the thought that someone here might know exactly where her sister was. Care for a spot? A warm voice interrupted. Arya looked up to see Luke Moretti. No top hat or cane this time, wearing a simple black t-shirt and fitted trousers. The casual outfit made him appear more human, less untouchable ringmaster. Yet there was still a quiet intensity behind his eyes. She smiled politely. Sure, just trying to improve my transitions. He nodded, watching her fold into a graceful stretch. Your transitions in mid-air were already stellar, but I noticed you tense up before you release. If you loosen your grip a fraction of a second earlier, you'll catch the bar more fluidly. Arya exhaled slowly. Thanks for the tip. I've been training alone for a while, so real feedback helps. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the circus around them felt like an unseen audience, acknowledging the subtle exchange. Then Luke cleared his throat, eyes flicking toward her. So, how are you liking it here so far? Crazy, isn't it? She let out a half laugh. Wild doesn't even cover it. Everything feels so overwhelming, but in a good way. He nodded, crossing his arms. I get it. When I first joined, I felt like I'd been thrown into a dream world I could barely understand. It took me a while to realize how the dream can also hold nightmares. There was a darkness in his tone, a hint that life behind the gilded circus's curtains wasn't always sparkling. Arya's pulse jumped, wanting to press him for details about Allegra or Nikolai. But she hesitated. Was he trustworthy, or caught in the same tangled web? Instead, she took a diplomatic approach. I imagine the pressure is intense. So many personalities, so much money on the line. You have no idea, he said with a quiet chuckle, though strain tugged at his features. But I love the craft. I love watching people push past their limits. We make magic here, for the audience, yes, but also for ourselves. When it works, there's nothing like it. His words resonated deep in her chest. Allegra once told me something like that, Arya recalled. That flying wasn't just a performance. It was a moment of personal transcendence. She realized, with a pang of longing, how much she missed her sister's fearless grin in times like this. Luke's gaze lingered on Arya, as if he sensed her internal struggle. Is something wrong? You look troubled. For a split second, she almost confessed everything. Her sister's disappearance, the gnawing suspicion that the circus was involved. But a voice of caution held her back. Not yet, she warned herself. You don't know who you can trust. I'm all right, she lied gently, rising from her stretch. Just tired, but I'll manage. He seemed to register the half-truth but didn't press. If you need anything, someone to talk to or a spotter for practice, my door's open. Thank you. Despite her caution, warmth flared in her chest. His kindness felt real, and it both comforted and unsettled her. Later that night, after most performers had drifted away, Arya remained in the practice hall to rehearse. The hush of the late hour weighed on her, but the trapeze called to her like a lifeline. She climbed up, heart pounding. In each swing and release, she imagined Allegra's presence. Maybe her sister had practiced in this same hall, trusting the same rigging. On the far side of the tent, she spotted a solitary figure watching. A slim, compact man fiddling with a mechanical device. Zhang Wei, she guessed. He caught her eye, gave a polite nod, then returned to adjusting what looked like a specialized harness. Arya tucked that detail away. They must go all out with custom rigs. Another sign of money and secrecy. She repeated her routine thrice, arms shaking with exertion, a sheen of sweat covering her forehead. Finally, she dismounted, breath ragged, adrenaline coursing. The rhythm, the power. This was where she felt most alive. But as she started to pack up, a small wave of dread lapped at the edge of her excitement. I'm inside now. They've accepted me as one of their own. Tomorrow or the next day, Nikolai Orlov would likely make contact, maybe probe her motivations. And if he was linked to Allegra's disappearance, she clenched her fists, pushing away a rush of fear. I won't let them swallow me up. I'll find the truth. In the silence of the practice hall, her own vow sounded loud as thunder in her ears. A hush settled over the gilded circus grounds as midnight approached. In the warm glow of lanterns hung along tent ropes, performers meandered back to their personal trailers or joined secretive after-parties. Gone were the throngs of curious visitors who'd wandered through during the day. Now only the circus folk remained, each with their own secrets in the making. Arya Fontaine slipped between two large tents, her footsteps muffled on the soft earth. She couldn't help but notice how quickly she'd come to memorize this labyrinth of canvas and string lights. And yet, she thought with a shiver, I've barely scratched the surface. So many questions about Allegra, so many rumors swirling around Nikolai Orlov, and so little time to find real answers before the next big show. A strong gust ruffled the tent flaps, sending shadows dancing across her path. Voices rose and fell nearby, low, urgent tones that piqued her curiosity. She hesitated, trying to decide if eavesdropping might help. Maybe I'll overhear something about my sister, she reasoned, heart thumping with guilt. She stepped closer to the source of the voices, pressing herself against the side of a small, striped tent. Her pulse nearly hammered out of her chest when she recognized one of the speakers. Nikolai Orlov himself, the man behind the invitation, the rumored director of operations who wielded near-absolute power over the circus finances, travel schedules, and sponsor negotiations. I'm telling you, the margin on that last event was too thin, Nikolai hissed, frustration sizzling in his voice. If we're going to satisfy our investors, we'll need a more profitable spectacle next time. Another voice, someone from the staff, murmured a low response Arya couldn't quite catch. Then Nikolai spoke again, measured but undeniably cold. Ensure everything runs smoothly. Luke can handle the show aspects, but it's our job to manage the, let's call them, arrangements. I won't tolerate any more slip-ups like last season. Arrangements? Slip-ups? A chill wind coursed down Arya's spine. What does that mean? She leaned forward, desperate to pick up more clues. But the next moment, something rattled near her feet. An empty metal bucket someone had left outside. It wobbled on the packed dirt, echoing like a tiny gong. Her heart seized. Too loud. Instinctively, she ducked behind a stack of crates, praying no one spotted her. The voices halted. A tense silence settled, thick as fog. Seconds later, the tent flap swished. Bootsteps crunched across the ground. Arya dared not move, every muscle locked. She caught a glimpse of tall, polished boots, the person scanning the darkness. Nikolai? Or one of his cohorts? The boots paused near the bucket, then pivoted away. After a taut moment, the footsteps retreated into the tent. Arya let out a silent exhale, realizing she'd been holding her breath for far too long. I can't risk getting caught before I know more. With that thought, she carefully emerged from her hiding spot and hurried in the opposite direction, heart pounding like a drum. A short while later, Arya found herself in a quieter area of the camp, lined with trailers painted in wild swirls of color. She paused outside one in particular, a modest trailer marked with an elegant sign reading Camilla Salazar, illusionist. Through a small window, she could see the glow of a lamp and the silhouette of Camilla hunched over a table. We illusions folk see more than people think, Camilla had told her. Maybe Arya's best chance at honest insights lay with the friendly illusionist who seemed unafraid to speak her mind. Even if it felt risky, Arya needed an ally. She raised her knuckles to knock, but the door swung open before she could rap once. Camilla's sharp eyes narrowed, then softened when she recognized Arya. Couldn't sleep either, huh? Not really, Arya admitted, stepping inside. The trailer's interior was cozy, Silken drapes, warm lamplight, a faint incense smell that reminded her of distant spice markets. On a narrow table beside a mirror, half a dozen stage props lay scattered. Decks of trick cards, small mirrors, and hinged boxes used for illusions. Camilla closed the door quietly. "Take a seat. I'm just packing some illusions for tomorrow's rehearsal." Arya sank into a cushioned bench, nerves still buzzing from her near encounter with Nikolai. She fiddled with her fingers, uncertain how much to reveal. "I heard Nikolai talking about arrangements with someone just now," she blurted, voice low. It sounded ominous. Camilla stilled, setting down a glossy black wand she'd been cleaning. "He's always dealing with something. Sponsors, investors, hush-hush deals that keep this place rolling in gold. I try not to poke my nose in too deep." Arya swallowed. "Aren't you worried? Doesn't it feel wrong?" Sighing, Camilla joined her on the bench. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't uneasy. But the Gilded Circus is a lifeline for many of us. Jiang Wei, for instance. He lost his entire workshop in a fire years ago. Nikolai swooped in with the promise of high-end resources for him to experiment with illusions, harnesses, you name it. For me, he offered the chance to wow the most exclusive audiences worldwide. Some nights I ask myself if the price we pay is too high." Her words sank into Arya's chest, leaving a hollow ache. People here rely on Nikolai's resources, his connections. If Allegra discovered wrongdoing, she might have threatened that lifeline. The thought made her blood run cold. "Camilla," she started, voice trembling. "My sister Allegra was an aerialist here. Did you ever see her?" Camilla's eyes widened slightly, then clouded with caution. "Allegra Fontaine? She was brilliant. Fearless, really?" A sadness laced her tone. "We weren't close, but I remember her last few weeks. She seemed preoccupied, whispered things about discrepancies in the circus's finances. I warned her to be careful." Arya's throat tightened, and then she vanished. A quiet hush settled. Camilla's hand touched Arya's shoulder. "You deserve answers, but watch your step. Nikolai isn't the only powerful figure involved. He's got backers who'll do anything to protect their investments." Shivering, Arya fought tears. Allegra was onto something. It cost her everything. She inhaled, gathering the resolve that had brought her here in the first place. "Thank you for being honest. I won't back down, but I'll be careful." Camilla nodded, a flicker of admiration in her gaze. "If you ever need help, illusions are my specialty. Distractions, vanishing acts, false bottoms." She smirked. "Never know when that might come in handy." Phobia. The next afternoon found Arya in the grand rehearsal tent, an expanse of open space draped in sparkling fabric and circled by enormous rings of rigging. Pale sunlight slipped through the tent's high flaps, illuminating trapeze bars, wires, and nets. Dozens of performers practiced in various corners. Drummers tested new rhythms, stilt walkers balanced precariously, and contortionists tied themselves into knots that made Arya's spine tingle. With her harness in hand, she prepared for a run-through of her aerial routine. The upcoming show, her first big public performance with the Gilded Circus, loomed just a day away. "If I do well, I'll earn trust. If I fail, I could lose access to crucial leads." She attached the harness's buckles, testing their fit. Nearby, Jiang Wei monitored the rigging lines from a control station of his own design. Arya caught a glimpse of his intense focus as he tapped a touchscreen that displayed weight calculations and safety parameters. She remembered Camilla's mention of his background, how Nikolai had given him a second chance after a fire destroyed his workshop. She mustered the courage to wave. "Hi, Jiang Wei, right?" He turned, face unsmiling but not hostile. "Yes, that's me." His eyes shifted to the harness she held, examining the brand and modifications. "Want me to give that a quick check? This rigging can be tricky if you're unfamiliar with the custom clamps." Relief flooded her. "That'd be great." He walked over, carefully inspecting each clip. His fingers traced the seams. "We use a specialized mechanism. Enhances movement but can jam if not locked properly. Good job hooking it up." A hint of approval softened his tone. "I'm still getting used to all the upgrades," she admitted. "Back home, I used a simple trapeze bar and rope." A small smile tugged at the corner of Jiang Wei's mouth. "Welcome to the big leagues. We strive for innovation. Keeps the axe fresh for demanding audiences. And demanding sponsors." At that, Arya recalled the mention of hush-hush deals. She considered whether to bring it up, but decided to tread lightly. "It must be stressful," she said, voice mild. "Meeting those expectations." He pressed his lips together, returning his gaze to the touchscreen. Stressful indeed. A pause. But it's better than what I had before. I can't afford to lose this opportunity. The quiet sincerity in his voice tugged at Arya's heart. He's invested too, just like Camilla. She nodded, stepping toward the ladder that led to her trapeze platform. Thanks for the help. He offered a curt nod, turning back to his console. They all have reasons to stay. What if Allegra's determination to expose secrets threatened their livelihoods too? Shaking off the uneasy thought, Arya focused on the climb. Step by step, she ascended. The familiar hush of height embraced her. Releasing a slow breath, she launched into her routine. Swing, release, flip. The bar soared under her grip, the tense open air rushing in her ears. For a few precious seconds, she let everything else melt away. Allegra's disappearance, Nikolai's menacing authority, the hidden pains of her new friends. But even as she reveled in the flight, a nagging sense of vigilance throbbed at the back of her mind. She couldn't forget how swiftly Allegra had vanished. If Arya pushed too hard, she might face the same fate. That evening, the circus set up an informal group dinner in the main tent. Round tables draped in satin sprouted across the ring, bearing platters of roasted vegetables, rice dishes, and fresh fruit. Performers mingled in partial costume, laughter, and gossip, creating an undercurrent of camaraderie. Yet Arya sensed an invisible fault line. Some performers openly relaxed, while others kept glancing over their shoulders, as if anticipating an intrusion. Camilla waved Arya over to a half-full table. Already seated were Jiang Wei, a quiet contortionist named Liv, and another dancer. Arya joined them, grateful for the company. Small talk sprinkled the meal. Upcoming acts, costume repairs, comedic mishaps and dress rehearsals. But after a few minutes, the chatter subdued. Nikolai Orlov entered the tent. Eyes flicked his way with a mixture of awe and trepidation. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and moved like he owned every corner of the circus. A hush followed him, as though the entire group dinner had become his private audience. He scanned the tables, gaze predatory, until he spotted Arya. A cool smile curved his lips. With measured steps, he approached. Arya's pulse spiked. Stay calm. Camilla stiffened beside her, and Jiang Wei's features hardened. Liv set her fork down with trembling fingers. Clearly, Arya wasn't the only one wary of this man. Miss Fontaine, Nikolai's voice was smooth as velvet. I've been hearing rave feedback about your aerial abilities. She forced a polite smile. Thank you, Mr. Orlov. He nodded once, ignoring the rest of the table. We have an important show soon. Invited sponsors. Potential future patrons. I trust you'll be ready. Yes, she replied carefully. I'll do my best. Nikolai's eyes narrowed slightly. Arya had the disconcerting feeling he was assessing more than just her skill, perhaps measuring her loyalty or capacity for secrets. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and left. The moment he was gone, a collective exhale followed. Camilla muttered, "He's in a mood. Something must be stressing him out more than usual." Jiang Wei looked pensive. Sponsors might be tightening the leash. He glanced toward Arya, voice low. Be careful. He's been known to handle problems decisively. Arya swallowed. The mention of problems sent a tremor through her. Allegra. She wanted to expose him. She stared at the now vacant place where Nikolai had stood. A new wave of determination flooding her veins. I won't end up silenced like my sister. I'll be ready for him. Tucking her fear behind a mask of composure, she resumed her meal. Nikolai might rule here with an iron grip, but she was no longer alone. Camilla, Jiang Wei, perhaps others had quietly experienced the circus's darker edges, and each of them had something to lose. The hush of the tent turned festive again as more performers joined the dinner. Yet Arya could hardly taste the food, her thoughts racing over everything she'd learned. Allegra's warnings, Nikolai's cryptic deals, the hush that fell whenever he appeared. A tight resolve formed in her chest. I'll find out what happened, Allegra, she promised silently, no matter the risk. Across the table, Camilla caught Arya's eye, a glimmer of understanding passing between them. And though the music and laughter swelled anew, Arya felt the hum of danger beneath every note, danger that would only escalate with each new performance. The sun peeked over the caravan of gilded trailers and opulent tents, casting elongated shadows on the circus grounds. Arya stood by a makeshift outdoor stage, rubbing a dull ache in her shoulder. The intense rehearsals and restless nights had begun taking a toll. In the distance, she could see a crew assembling a rickety platform for a daytime preview show, a teaser event for local onlookers who might buy tickets for the grand performance. She inhaled deeply, her breath tinged with the scent of fresh hay and roasted coffee from a vendor's cart nearby. The day felt oddly transitional, as if poised on a knife's edge between routine performance and something far more dangerous. If only Allegra were here, Arya thought. She'd tell me to keep my chin up. Are you okay? A familiar warm voice sent a tremor through her. Turning, she found Luke Moretti stepping up behind her. He wasn't in his ringmaster finery at the moment, just dark jeans and an unbuttoned vest over a simple shirt, revealing the faint swirl of a tattoo near his collarbone. He looked every bit the star showman off duty, yet there was an unguarded softness in his eyes that made her exhale some of her tension. Fine, she managed, then amended with a small shrug. Well, as fine as anyone can be. Juggling new stunts and no sleep. He studied her face, the corners of his mouth tilting in subtle concern. Long nights and early mornings. I know how that can grind you down. Arya offered a ghost of a grin. Comes with the territory, I guess. She let the fleeting silence speak for her, almost wishing he'd take the initiative and ask about her secrets, about Allegra, about how lost she truly felt. But maybe it was safer for both of them if he didn't. Luke gave a half smile in return, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I've seen you practicing after hours. You pour your soul into that trapeze. A pang of vulnerability shot through her. He's noticed. Warmth spread in her chest at the thought of him watching over her. Yet it also reminded her of the circus's watchful eyes. I find it easier to focus when there's no one around, she lied gently. In truth, she felt closest to Allegra in those quiet hours. Luke hesitated, gaze flicking briefly behind her as if to ensure no one else was eavesdropping. Listen, if there's anything on your mind, Arya's heart clenched. She wanted to confide in him. Tell him about the cryptic half-conversations she'd overheard. Nikolai's warnings, the fear that Allegra had uncovered something deadly. But she settled for a safer truth. I just want to make sure I don't let anyone down. This might be my only shot. He reached out, his hand almost touching her forearm, but stopping just shy. The gentle, unspoken gesture spoke volumes. You'll do great. I can see the fire in you, Arya. She offered a tender smile. For a moment, the world around them, stagehands hammering, performers chatting, felt distant, muted. In the hush between them, Arya sensed an undercurrent of understanding, even if he didn't know her full story. Could I trust him? A hopeful part of her asked. Before she could summon the courage to speak further, a stagehand hollered Luke's name. He cast Arya a regretful glance. Duty calls. Don't forget to eat something before the preview show. Then he jogged off, leaving her with a swirl of emotion. Later that morning, Camilla cornered Arya near a costume rack set up behind one of the smaller tents. The illusionist wore a bold top hat and a tailored jacket bedecked with shining lapels, ready for the mini performance. With a flick of her wrist, Camilla produced a silver scarf seemingly from thin air, handing it to Arya with a flourish. What's this? Arya asked, bemused. Think of it as a lucky charm, Camilla teased. But also, if you tie it around your arm or hold it at the right angle, you can distract an entire row of spectators with the reflective surface. Handy if you need to create a diversion. Arya blinked, then laughed softly. You truly are the queen of illusions. Camilla winked. And illusions are sometimes what save us. By the way, Zhang Wei asked if you could come by his workstation after the preview. He's tweaking the trapeze safety lines. Some new design he claims will reduce friction. Makes sense. That friction burned my palms last practice, Arya noted, glancing at her bandaged right hand. I'll swing by after we wrap. Camilla leaned in, voice dropping. Also, I heard a rumor that Nikolai's been on the phone with some high-level backers. Something about a bigger final show and guaranteed returns on investment. He wants to dazzle them, maybe in an even more remote or exclusive locale. So keep your eyes open. A knot tightened in Arya's gut. A remote location could mean fewer witnesses and more power for Nikolai. She pressed the silver scarf to her chest. Thanks for the heads up. The midday preview show kicked off under a bright sun that bathed the ring in harsh light. Fewer spectators dotted the small stands, mostly curious locals and families milling about. Luke emceed the demonstration, using his warm, commanding voice to set the stage for each act. Arya prepared backstage, adjusting her practice costume and checking her trapeze rig. Though this wasn't the main performance, it still felt like a test. Every routine, every moment in the air, is another chance to prove myself. or slip up. She stepped into the ring as Luke announced her name, adrenaline already buzzing. Despite the modest crowd, she felt her pulse quicken. At a nod from the stagehand, she grasped the trapeze bar and leapt. The surge of momentum, the tight coil of her muscles, the rush of weightlessness. It all reminded her why she loved this so fiercely. She flipped into a neat arched position, letting the air cradle her. Below, she glimpsed Luke, arms folded over his chest, watching her with an approving tilt of his head. In a heartbeat of clarity, she realized she wanted him to be proud, not just of her skill, but of her resolve. Her final dismount was swift, precise, ending in a land and bow that elicited a smattering of applause. Perhaps not the thunderous ovations of a packed night show, but enough to bring a satisfied smile to her lips. She waved, sweat beading her forehead, the midday heat blistering. As the show concluded, performers broke into groups, each heading off to their respective corners of the circus to prep for the coming big event. Arya made for Zhang Wei's workstation, weaving through colorfully dressed dancers and jugglers clowning around. She found Zhang Wei under a large canopy, hunched over a table strewn with cables, harness prototypes, and half-disassembled mechanical components. He looked up at her approach, a wrench in hand. "You did well out there," he said, voice quiet but earnest. "Thanks," Arya replied, eyeing the contraption he was working on. It resembled a pulley system with sleek metallic hooks. "Is that the new friction reducer?" He nodded. "I integrated ball bearings in the swivel joints. Should reduce rope burn by at least 40%. Here, try hooking this to your harness." Arya stepped closer, allowing him to clip the device onto her waist harness. She tested the movement, rolling her shoulders, rotating her torso. There was a distinct smoothness in how the harness slid. "Wow, that's impressive. You're like a magician of mechanics." A faint smile tugged his lips. "I had a decent workshop before. Everything. But this circus gave me a chance to rebuild. For that, I'm grateful." She nodded, understanding the unspoken. He, like Camilla, owed a debt of opportunity to Nikolai. "I'm glad you have the freedom to experiment," she offered gently, before lowering her voice. "I just hope it doesn't come with strings attached." His eyes flicked up, momentarily guarded. Then he sighed, focusing on the harness again. "Nikolai is not a man who gives anything freely. We're all bound by contracts and unspoken pacts here. Some of us accept it because, what choice do we have?" Arya swallowed, remembering Allegra's cryptic references to finances and hush-hush deals. "But what if you found out that those unspoken pacts were hurting people? Would you still stay?" Zhang Wei paused, a line of tension marking his brow. "That depends on who's getting hurt, and how. It's not always black and white. I try to do as much good as I can from where I am." A surge of empathy overwhelmed her. "I get it." She gently placed a hand on his shoulder, surprising even herself. "I appreciate your honesty. Truly." Their quiet moment was shattered by a sudden commotion near the main tent entrance. Raised voices, a clang of metal. Arya and Zhang Wei exchanged alarmed glances. They abandoned the harness prototype, hurrying toward the noise. Rounding a corner, they found a small group of stagehands struggling to contain an overturned crate of lighting equipment. The metal rods clattered across the ground, some dangerously close to the feet of passing patrons. Among them, Camilla was trying to calm the situation, her top hat nearly toppling off. Nikolai Orlov appeared from behind a tall partition, eyebrows slashed low with anger. "What on earth is going on here?" he demanded, stepping forward. His voice cut through the air, quiet but lethal. A trembling stagehand, a wiry teenager who looked new, stuttered an apology. I lost my grip, sir. The crate was heavier than—" "Don't you realize we have VIP investors showing up tonight?" Nikolai hissed. "Do you think they want to see our stagehands tossing expensive equipment around like scrap?" The boy's face went pale. Before Arya could even blink, Luke stepped in, placing a calming hand on Nikolai's shoulder. "It was an accident, Nikolai. Let's help them clean up. No harm done." Nikolai shot Luke a venomous glance, but then forcibly schooled his expression. He exhaled, plastering on a controlled smile for any onlookers. "Fine, but mark my words, any further negligence will not be tolerated." Arya's stomach twisted. He rules with fear. As the stagehands gathered the scattered rods, she saw tears welling in the boy's eyes. Camilla helped him lift the crate, whispering encouragement. Luke guided Nikolai away, trying to diffuse the tension. Arya caught only a snippet of their low-spoken exchange. "We can't run this place with threats," Luke murmured fiercely. "Maybe you can't," Nikolai retorted, eyes narrowing. But I will, if it keeps everything, and everyone, in line. Their voices faded as they moved deeper into the labyrinth of tents. Still, the weight of Nikolai's anger lingered like a heavy pall. Arya clenched her fists, reminded yet again of how precarious life in the Gilded Circus could be. If he's willing to threaten a kid for dropping a crate, what would he do if he knew someone was digging up the truth about Allegra? As she helped gather the last of the fallen equipment, her mind churned. She couldn't stand the idea of letting Nikolai terrorize people unchecked. Yet she also couldn't ignore the fact that many, Zhang Wei, Camilla, even Luke, relied on the circus's success. A swirl of doubt clouded her thoughts. Curtain call of doubt, she mused inwardly, a bitter taste in her mouth. Every performance was just a mask covering a deeper well of fear and secrets. And if she pulled that mask away, would the entire show come crashing down, taking all her new friends with it? She wasn't sure. But one thing blazed clearly in her heart. Allegra deserved justice, and everyone trapped under Nikolai's shadow deserved a chance at freedom. Resolving the puzzle without destroying countless livelihoods would be the real high-wire act, and the fall might be deadly if she slipped. The wind that evening had an electric charge to it, gusting across the Gilded Circus camp and rattling the edges of its lavish tents. Arya Fontaine zipped up a thin jacket as she hurried between towering rows of equipment crates. The day's tension still clung to her. Nikolai's cold threats, Luke's unspoken worry, Zhang Wei's guarded honesty. The deeper I dig, the more complicated it gets. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with Camilla Salazar, who was cradling an armful of sparkling scarves. The illusionist let out a breathy laugh. "Watch your step, kid. Almost swallowed me in one of my own illusions." "Sorry," Arya replied, flashing an apologetic grin. "I was distracted." Camilla's eyes flickered with concern. "Thinking of Allegra?" Arya hesitated, then nodded. She was grateful Camilla didn't beat around the bush. "It's just, I keep searching for any tangible link to her. No one's giving me straight answers. Half the staff seems scared to talk." Camilla laid a comforting hand on Arya's shoulder. "Tell you what, meet me at the old storage pavilion tonight after the rehearsal. That's where Allegra used to keep her personal items. They cleared it out ages ago, but I heard rumors that some of her things might still be tucked away." She paused, voice softening. "It's a long shot, but worth a look." Arya's pulse quickened with cautious hope. "Thank you. I'll be there." Several hours later, most of the performers had retired to their trailers or found their way to small gatherings. A hush descended, broken only by the occasional flap of canvas or the hum of generator lights. Arya slipped out of her trailer, heart drumming in her ears. She moved quietly toward the far side of the grounds, where a large, weathered tent stood apart from the main ring. A crooked wooden sign nailed to a post read, "Storage Pavilion. Authorized personnel only." Lantern light bled through a small window near the top, casting dancing shadows on the sand. Camilla was waiting by the entrance, tapping her foot impatiently. She wore a sleek black jacket over her stage bodysuit. Apparently she hadn't bothered to change. "You ready?" she asked, voice hushed. "As I'll ever be." They ducked inside. The pavilion smelled of dust and moth-eaten fabric. Rows of shelves towered overhead, stacked with retired props. Battered illusions, faded costumes, cracked mirrors. It was a graveyard of past glories. A single lantern hung from the ceiling, flickering ominously. "We should split up," Camilla suggested, pulling out a small flashlight from her jacket. "Yell if you find anything that might have been hers." Arya nodded and made her way down a narrow aisle piled with boxes. She craned her neck at each label. 1940s wardrobe, retired elephant act, old tools. Everything felt random and neglected. What was Allegra even doing here, she wondered, heart tight. Eventually, she reached a cluster of crates marked Ariel, spare rigging. The topmost box had a label scrawled in faded marker. Allegra. Personal? Her breath caught. Carefully, she pried open the lid, dust billowing into the air. Inside lay a tangle of old trapeze straps, frayed ribbons, and a small leather-bound journal. Her heart thundered in her chest. A journal? She lifted it, running her thumb over the worn cover. Gold filigree on the spine read A.F. Allegra Fontaine, she whispered, tears prickling her eyes. This is it. Her voice on paper. Camilla, she called softly, but the illusionist was hidden somewhere amidst the towering shelves. Arya opened the journal to the first page, scanning the neat handwriting. I joined the Gilded Circus full of excitement. Now, I'm seeing cracks in the gilding. She skipped to a later entry, eyes darting over the words. He's funneling money from our ticket sales into private accounts. Zhang Wei suspects it's laundered funds, but he doesn't want to cross Nikolai. I feel sick. Another page. Luke is so close to uncovering something, but he won't say what. He's protective of us, yet he's in over his head. Still, I can't just let this happen. If I vanish suddenly, it's because I got too close. Arya's blood chilled. It's all here. She read on, tears gathering as Allegra mentioned missing finances, shady sponsor deals, and hints of blackmail. None spelled out in exact detail, but enough to confirm Arya's worst suspicions. Allegra never ran away. She was silenced. Clutching the journal, Arya sank onto a crate, hands trembling. I did it, Allegra. I found your words. She felt both triumph and dread. If Nikolai found out Arya had this, she'd be the next to disappear. The thought made her break into a cold sweat. I heard your voice, Camilla's whisper cut through the gloom. She rounded the corner, shining her flashlight at Arya. What did you find? Instead of replying, Arya held up the journal. Camilla's eyes widened. She drew closer, scanning the entries Arya pointed out. Holy, this is it, isn't it? Proof Allegra was onto Nikolai's schemes. Arya nodded, voice shaking. I have to figure out how to use this without bringing the entire circus down, or putting everyone at risk. She recalled how Zhang Wei, Camilla, and countless others depended on the show for their livelihoods. But more than that, I have to keep it safe. If Nikolai even suspects, Camilla placed a hand on Arya's, steadying her. We'll keep it hidden. We'll go through it together, piece by piece. Maybe we can find a way to leak the information to authorities who'll handle it quietly, without nuking the entire operation. She paused, taking a measured breath. And maybe we can find clues to where Allegra was taken. This circus travels constantly. If Nikolai stashed her somewhere, the journal might hold hints. The idea lit a small flame of hope in Arya's chest. She flipped through the final pages. A date scrawled in the margin grabbed her attention. Meeting with N. Tonight, in the Illusions tent. The day after that entry, the journal ended abruptly. This must have been when she confronted Nikolai. She closed the journal, hugging it to her chest as though it were Allegra herself. We should go. Staying too long is risky. With Camilla's help, she resealed the crate and carefully stowed away any sign they'd been there. Then they slipped out of the pavilion, hearts pounding. Back at Arya's trailer, they sat around a small fold-out table, the journal placed carefully between them. Camilla brewed some soothing tea on a mini electric kettle. The dim overhead light threw their anxious silhouettes against the walls. What next? Camilla asked, stirring in a spoonful of honey. Arya ran a hand through her hair, mind whirling. Allegra wrote about confronting Nikolai in the Illusions tent. Maybe we should check that spot. If she hid anything else or left a clue, Camilla nodded. We can do it late tomorrow, once everyone's focused on rehearsal for the next big show. I can pretend I'm adjusting props or practicing illusions. Suddenly, a knock on the trailer door made them both jump. Arya's heart vaulted into her throat. Is it Nikolai? She and Camilla exchanged wide-eyed looks. Camilla motioned Arya to hide the journal. Quickly, Arya slipped it under a cushion. Then Camilla cracked the door open a sliver. To their relief, it was Zhang Wei, looking concerned but not hostile. Can I come in? Camilla glanced back at Arya, who nodded. She opened the door fully, ushering Zhang Wei inside. His gaze swept the cramped space, lingering on Arya's tense expression and Camilla's protective stance. I heard you two sneaking around the old pavilion. He swallowed. You found something, didn't you? Arya froze. Does he already suspect we have the journal? She remembered Allegra's mentions that he was aware of wrongdoing but feared losing his place. Was he a threat or an ally? Camilla, always quicker on the draw, folded her arms. Why do you ask? Zhang Wei cast a sidelong glance at the cushion Arya had just fussed with. Maybe he noticed something off. He sighed, pushing a hand through his hair. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. If you found anything that might help clarify how Allegra disappeared, I want to help. She tried talking to me before it all went down, but I was too scared. I regret it. Arya's posture softened. He's sincere. She bit her lip, deciding in a moment of intuition. We found Allegra's journal, she confessed quietly. It shows she discovered Nikolai's using the circus for illegal deals. She confronted him, and then vanished. Zhang Wei's face pinched with guilt. I should have warned her how ruthless he can be. I'm sorry. A shaky breath. I'll do whatever I can. My equipment, my backstage access. Just let me know. Camilla and Arya exchanged relieved smiles. Having Jiang Wei's expertise could be crucial if they hoped to expose Nikolai, but it also multiplied their risk. The more people in on the secret, the more likely Nikolai sniffs it out. Still, Arya remembered the scared teenage stagehand from earlier. Nikolai's threats, the tears in the boy's eyes. Enough is enough. She gently patted the cushion where the journal lay hidden. We'll go through the details, quietly, and figure out our next steps. Tomorrow, we search the illusions tent for more clues. Jiang Wei nodded, glancing anxiously at the trailer door. Just be careful. If Nikolai realizes what you're up to. His voice trailed off, leaving the dire possibilities unspoken. As the night stretched on, they whispered plans, huddled over cups of rapidly cooling tea. Outside, the wind persisted, rattling the tents like a warning. Arya clung to Allegra's words, determined to finish what her sister had started. No matter how dark the secrets, she wouldn't let fear silence her. Morning sun reflected off rows of polished car hoods lined up outside the circus grounds. It was travel day, time for the gilded circus to uproot its lavish tents once again and shift to a new city. Arya Fontaine woke early to the rattle of stagehands dismantling equipment and the clang of metal poles. Sleep had been elusive. She was still reeling from finding Allegra's journal and forging a quiet alliance with Camilla and Jiang Wei. We have proof of Nikolai's corruption, she reminded herself while quickly packing her duffel in her cramped trailer. But how do we use it without getting everyone burned? Outside, the crisp morning air tasted of anticipation and fatigue. Performers hurried about, some sipping strong coffee, others struggling with heavy crates. Camilla, sporting a sleek jacket over her stage attire, waved Arya over to where one of the sleek transport buses idled. "Didn't sleep, did you?" Camilla asked, voice subdued. Arya shrugged. "Hard to sleep when your world's turning upside down." She lowered her voice, glancing around warily. "Any sign of Nikolai yet?" "Not so far," Camilla said, eyes narrowing. "But that doesn't mean he's not watching." A flush of anxiety tightened Arya's throat. He's always watching, or sending someone to watch. She thought of Allegra's final journal entries describing a confrontation in the illusions tent, and how she'd vanished right after. Before they could say more, Luke Moretti approached with purposeful strides. Dressed in a dark blazer and jeans, he still carried himself with the unmistakable presence of the ringmaster, even off stage. As he got closer, Arya's pulse lifted at the subtle warmth in his gaze. "Ladies, we're wheels up in less than half an hour," he said, voice edged with fatigue. "Our next show will be in a major coastal city, very high profile. VIP sponsors. We'll have about a day to set up before rehearsals start." Camilla forced a grin. "Coastal city, huh? Bet that means a lot of flashy yacht-owning patrons." Luke's returning smile was thin. "Exactly. Let's hope the weather cooperates, or we'll be putting on a soggy show." He gave Arya a faint nod, then moved down the row of performers to double-check everyone's readiness. Once he was out of earshot, Camilla raised an eyebrow. "Looks like someone's caught the ringmaster's interest." Arya managed a wry smile. "He's just being friendly, making sure everyone's okay." "Sure." Camilla smirked knowingly but let it drop. "I'll see you on the bus." A few hours later, Arya found herself sitting by a bus window, rolling through winding highways that eventually bled into a coastal route. The sea sparkled in the distance, a vast blue expanse. She dozed intermittently, jostled by bumps in the road. Whenever she closed her eyes, images of Allegra's journal pages swam into focus. Secret accounts, missing finances, Luke's conflict with Nikolai. We can't let Allegra's bravery go to waste. When she finally opened her eyes to the midday sun, she realized Luke had settled in the seat across the aisle. He offered a small wave, then looked around to ensure minimal eavesdroppers. "Mind if I ask how you're adjusting?" She swallowed, nerves fluttering. "It's a lot, but I'm still here." "I'm glad," he said softly, leaning in so their conversation stayed private. "I know the circus can be overwhelming. Ever since I became ringmaster, I've seen so many performers come and go. Some can't handle the pace, others leave for personal reasons." He paused, something darker drifting across his expression. "A few just disappear without a word." Arya's throat tightened. "Disappear, like Allegra." She forced her voice to stay even. "That doesn't bother you?" His gaze flicked to the back of the bus, where Nikolai's security men often sat. "It does, but Nikolai keeps the finances and sponsor relationships locked down. I handle the show elements, try to protect the performers. Sometimes it's not enough." There was a raw honesty in his words. Her chest ached with empathy. I've noticed how you step in when Nikolai snaps at people. Luke gave a short, humorless laugh. I do what I can. But he holds the purse strings. If we lose sponsors, the entire troop suffers. It's a twisted balance. Arya bit her lip, remembering how her sister's notes mentioned Luke's frustration, how he'd discovered suspicious transactions. What if there's no saving the balance? What if the system itself is broken? He looked at her sharply, and for a moment Arya thought she'd gone too far. But his expression softened into grim acceptance. Then maybe it's time to break free. But it'll take more than just me. Nikolai's got powerful backers. She wanted to confide that she had proof. Allegra's own words. The missing money trail. Yet she couldn't risk it. Not yet. Instead, she gave his hand a quick, reassuring squeeze across the aisle. You're not alone, Luke. Their eyes met, an unspoken promise passing between them. Then the bus lurched, tossing them back into reality. By late afternoon, the caravan arrived at its destination, a sprawling seaside city with pastel-colored buildings stacked against the coastline. Arya's breath caught at the picturesque scenery. Gleaming yachts dotted the marina, and cobblestone streets curved around centuries-old architecture. Beautiful on the surface, Arya mused, but who knows what secrets lurk beneath. As the buses parked in a gated courtyard, staff jumped into action, unloading cargo, setting up rigging, and scouting performance spots. Gilded circus banners were draped across temporary arches, giving the old European-style plaza a splash of vibrant color. Already, passers-by snapped photos from behind security ropes, intrigued by the sudden spectacle. Arya helped carry a few smaller props, scanning the area for potential hazards, or spies. She caught a glimpse of Jiang Wei, who discreetly lifted a coil of rope to show her he'd brought extra gear, presumably to tweak the custom harness again. Camilla was off to the side, talking to a local official who seemed fascinated by illusions. Then, from the corner of her eye, Arya spotted Nikolai Orlov, stepping out of a sleek black car. He wore a crisp suit and dark sunglasses, exuding authority. On the phone, he waved away a staff member who tried to greet him. Important calls, no doubt. Her gut twisted at the memory of Allegra's scrawled lines about funneling money, threatening people. Nikolai paced near the courtyard's high stone wall, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Arya paused, pretending to check her phone while inching closer to eavesdrop. Deal with any performer who jeopardizes our arrangement, he hissed, words slicing the balmy afternoon air. Expect a show that's profitable, or our partners walk. A second voice on the other end responded. Arya couldn't decipher the words, but Nikolai's face darkened. I'll handle it. We've come too far to let a few rebellious acts destroy our reputation. He ended the call, scanning the courtyard like a hawk. Arya's heart thumped. She darted behind a stack of crates as his gaze swept her direction. Does he suspect me? Or is he just on high alert? Moments later, Luke walked over to Nikolai with a sheaf of papers in hand. Their conversation, too distant to hear, seemed tense. Luke's posture was rigid, but he tried to maintain polite composure. Nikolai gestured vehemently with the phone. Another argument? Or just normal business friction? Arya exhaled shakily, picking up a small prop and resuming her chores. Stay inconspicuous. The plan was simple. Keep her head down, perform well, and quietly investigate leads from Allegra's journal. If she was lucky, Nikolai wouldn't notice her until it was too late for him to intervene. That evening, after the sun dipped below the horizon, the circus employees gathered in the newly raised main tent for a quick orientation. Chandeliers cast a warm glow on rows of plush seating installed for wealthy patrons. The stage was set with a polished wooden ring, flanked by vibrant curtains and gilded pillars. A perfect blend of old-world charm and modern opulence, Arya thought, tapping her foot on the gleaming floor. Luke stood at the center, posture proud but strained. We've got 24 hours to rehearse before the first gala night. Let's keep it tight and professional. The city's elite will be watching. Nikolai lingered off to one side, arms crossed, face impassive. To Arya's surprise, he didn't speak, though his silent presence loomed over the entire gathering. One by one, the department leads, lighting, choreography, illusions, gave brief updates. Jiang Wei outlined new safety harness improvements, and Camilla promised a breathtaking new vanish act. When it was Arya's turn, she felt the press of Nikolai's gaze like a hot brand on the back of her neck. She cleared her throat. I'll be running an aerial routine with an updated harness from Jiang Wei. A series of release and catch sequences culminating in a final mid-air twist. Luke nodded encouragement, while Nikolai's expression remained stony. "Make sure it dazzles," Nikolai said, voice as sharp as a blade. "These patrons have short attention spans and deep pockets." Arya forced a cool nod. "Understood. I won't fail." After the meeting, the crowd dispersed. Nikolai exited swiftly, flanked by two of his men who were glued to phones, probably checking on sponsor arrivals. Arya caught Luke's eye across the tent, her heart clenching at the unspoken tension etched on his features. He's worried about something. Camilla sidled up, leaning in to whisper. "Zhang Wei wants to meet us by the Illusions tent in an hour. Says he might have discovered a lead in Allegra's notes about hidden storage compartments." Arya's pulse fluttered. "Then we'll go." She glanced toward Luke, wanting to clue him in, but a pang of guilt stopped her. He was too closely watched by Nikolai. Involving him might place him directly in the crosshairs. "We'll wait until we have concrete proof." Exhaustion tugged at her bones, but she pushed it aside. No rest until we know the truth. As the tent emptied, she lingered in the shadows, letting the hush of evening settle. This city, with its glamorous coastline and wealthy spectators, promised a glittering facade. But behind that facade, the gilded circus's dark secrets churned more fiercely than ever. Soon, Arya would join Camilla and Zhang Wei in picking apart those secrets piece by piece, guided by Allegra's final words. And all the while, Nikolai circled like a vulture, ready to snatch anyone who stepped out of line. With a trembling breath, Arya squared her shoulders. For Allegra. For everyone trapped under Nikolai's thumb. We'll see this through. She turned on her heel, slipping into the night, adrenaline pulsing through her veins. Late evening blanketed the waterfront city, transforming old stone streets into flickering corridors of lantern light. In the heart of the newly assembled gilded circus camp, Arya, Camilla, and Zhang Wei gathered by a secluded corner of the Illusions tent. A warm, salty wind drifted in from the nearby harbor, carrying distant laughter from high society parties. Arya clutched the edge of her light jacket, scanning the scene for prying eyes. The tent's canvas walls flapped restlessly, like they too were on edge. "Camilla, you're sure no one else is around?" Camilla nodded, slipping a small keyring from her pocket. "Positive. The others are focused on last-minute rehearsals and sponsor schmoozing. Luke is busy fielding final adjustments inside the main tent, which keeps him, and hopefully Nikolai, occupied." At the mention of Luke's name, Arya's mind flicked to their charged moment earlier that day when he'd opened up about how suffocating Nikolai's grip could be. He's trying so hard to protect everyone, she thought, a pang of empathy and admiration mingling in her chest. Zhang Wei gently cleared his throat, pulling Arya's attention back to the present. "We have about an hour before security does its next patrol. Let's move quickly." They slipped inside the Illusions tent, weaving through sets of towering stage props and trick mirrors leaning in haphazard stacks. Camilla flicked on a narrow-beamed flashlight, guiding them past the half-constructed illusions that would dazzle audiences the following night. At last, they arrived at a dingy back corner partitioned by a heavy burgundy curtain. Camilla brushed it aside, revealing a makeshift storage area. Dust motes danced in their flashlight beams, illuminating crates with half-torn labels, lengths of rope, and a variety of old illusion contraptions. Allegra's journal hinted she might have hidden something here, Arya whispered. She wrote about confronting Nikolai in this tent. Maybe she stashed extra proof in a trunk before that meeting. Zhang Wei nodded, stepping toward a row of nondescript wooden chests. "We'd better check them one by one. Camilla, your lockpicks?" Camilla produced a slim set of lockpicks from her jacket, arching an amused brow. "Never leave home without them." They worked methodically, prying open the first trunk. It was stuffed with a hodgepodge of old illusions, false floors, cracked mirrors, a battered rabbit cage. Nothing that screamed secret evidence. The second trunk yielded more props, some broken wands, a deck of trick cards, and illusions Camilla recognized from a retired act. Eventually, Arya's gaze settled on a slightly smaller trunk, set apart from the others, and locked with a newer-looking padlock. Her pulse quickened. Could this be it? Camilla knelt, fitting her pick into the padlock. Newer lock on an old trunk? That's suspicious, she muttered. After a few deft twists, the lock clicked open. Zhang Wei helped Arya lift the trunk's lid, and they all stilled. Inside lay a cluster of papers, carefully bound. Atop them rested a sealed envelope stamped with a crest Arya didn't recognize. A stylized serpent wrapped around a globe. Zhang Wei shone his flashlight over it, brow furrowing. "I've never seen that symbol before." Camilla gently lifted the papers beneath. A hush fell, as they realized these were financial ledgers, each page marked with columns of numbers and cryptic codes. Some sections were circled in Allegra's familiar handwriting. Aria's breath caught. It's exactly what Allegra wrote about in her journal. Documentation of off-the-books transactions. Looks like sponsor kickbacks, secret deposits, all carefully hidden from the circus's main accounts. She recognized a few names from Allegra's earlier notes. Likely big spending patrons. The sums were staggering, far beyond standard ticket revenue. Some references were in code, but Allegra had annotated them with question marks, as if she too had been trying to crack the puzzle. Zhang Wei let out a low whistle. If these are real, it's proof Nikolai's been laundering huge amounts of money through the circus, possibly for wealthy clients who want to hide their dealings. This is serious. The authorities would jump on it in a heartbeat. Camilla nodded grimly. It also proves that Allegra was getting dangerously close to exposing him. No wonder he made her disappear. A tremor passed through Aria. She braced herself on the trunk's rim, mind spinning with sorrow and anger. So close, she thought. Allegra risked everything to expose this. Footsteps outside the tent made them all freeze. The faint shuffle of someone pacing nearby. Their hearts thundered in unison. Camilla doused the flashlight, and they crouched behind the trunk, the darkness pressing in. Through a gap in the canvas, Aria glimpsed a shadow moving past. A man's voice hissed into a phone. Yes, Mr. Orloff wants updates on the new harness modifications. He's not taking any chances. A security guard, perhaps, or a staffer under Nikolai's orders. Silence stretched, broken only by the pounding of Aria's heart. Finally, the shadow departed, footsteps fading into the distance. They exhaled shakily, exchanging tense looks in the faint moonlit gloom. We can't risk staying here too long, Zhang Wei whispered. We should grab the documents and move them somewhere safer. Aria nodded, carefully bundling the ledgers. Camilla, can you hide them with your illusions? You mentioned building a false bottom prop. A faint smile curved Camilla's lips. Indeed, I have a special box among my stage gear. Nobody else knows about the hidden compartments. We'll stash it there. Zhang Wei reached for the mysterious envelope with the serpent crest, turning it over. Might be something inside that's important too. He gently worked his fingertips under the sealed flap, loosening it without tearing it. Aria hovered close, breath catching, as Zhang Wei pulled out a single piece of parchment. It bore a cryptic symbol in gold ink, a serpent twisted around a faint silhouette of the gilded circus emblem. No words, just that strange design. Any idea what that means? Aria asked, voice barely above a whisper. Zhang Wei shook his head. None. But it sure looks like some kind of secret society or hidden syndicate. Something bigger than just Nikolai and his sponsors? Camilla grimaced. That's exactly what we need. Another layer of danger. Aria pushed aside the swirl of fear threatening to lock her in place. We'll figure it out. If Allegra found this, she must have suspected some powerful forces pulling Nikolai's strings, knowing that might be our trump card. They sealed the envelope back up and added it to the ledger bundle. Camilla clicked on the flashlight briefly, leading them out of the illusions tent by a different route. She tucked the bundle under her jacket, hugging it close like contraband gold. Outside, the night had grown eerily still. The city lights reflected on the ocean, painting dancing ribbons of illumination across the water. Aria's stomach churned at the enormity of what they'd just uncovered. Laundered money, coded transactions, an ominous serpent symbol. It's bigger than I ever imagined. Xiaocongxi. Once safely tucked away in Camilla's trailer, they laid the documents on a small table, triple-checking that the curtains were drawn. Camilla rummaged through an adjacent trunk of stage props, unearthing a sleek wooden box with an intricate pattern. She slid open a compartment in the base, revealing a hidden interior. In you go, she murmured, carefully tucking the ledgers and envelope inside. With a soft click, the false bottom sealed. To any casual observer, it was just another unremarkable illusion box. Aria let out a slow breath, shoulders tight. We're one step closer to proving Nikolai's crimes. But if he even suspects we have this... She trailed off, dread gnawing at her insides. Zhang Wei rubbed his eyes, exhaustion etched into his features. We need a plan. Do we confront Luke? Go straight to the authorities? Or do we wait to gather more? If we move too soon, Nikolai might destroy the evidence. Or us. Camilla drummed her fingers on the box. We also have Allegra's journal and now these ledgers. That's enough to cause a scandal, but we don't know if the local police can be trusted. Nikolai might have high-level connections. Aria thought of Luke's quiet anguish. He'd want to do the right thing, but it's risky. Maybe we can confide in him. He's ringmaster, so he has some influence. But we have to make sure he's safe from retaliation. Zhang Wei nodded slowly, expression tense. He's the public face of this circus. If Nikolai tries to silence him, it'll cause a stir. That might give us a smokescreen to act. They exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation sinking in. This was no small con. It was an entire underworld operation, with Nikolai as a key player. Allegra paid the price for digging too deep. Arya's heart squeezed at the thought. Camilla carefully closed the trunk of props. One thing's for sure, we can't let this slip. Allegra didn't vanish for nothing. Her words, her courage, they led us here. Silence thickened in the small trailer, each of them wrestling with fear, guilt, and a burning sense of justice. Finally, Arya murmured, "We do it carefully, step by step. Keep performing, keep watch. When the time is right, we reveal everything and bring Nikolai down." Zhang Wei touched Arya's shoulder. "You're braver than you realize." She tried to smile, though a tremor of uncertainty ran through her. "This bravery came at a price for my sister. I only hope I can handle what's coming." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling palm trees and stirring the ocean's surface into wavering lights. The night felt charged with possibility and peril. With the serpent symbol still etched in her mind's eye, Arya steeled herself. The circus might sparkle with illusions, but behind them lies a monstrous truth. Tomorrow, the main tent would light up with spectacular shows for the city's elite, glitz and glamour on full display. But for Arya and her friends, the real spectacle was taking place off-stage, in hushed whispers and stolen documents. "We will find a way," she vowed silently, "for Allegra's sake, and for everyone who's been trapped by Nikolai's iron grip." They parted with subdued goodnights, each returning to their own trailers. Alone in her small space, Arya collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion and adrenaline colliding. Clutching a pillow, she stared at the wall, heart pounding with equal measures of dread and determination. With the serpent crest swirling in her thoughts, she whispered one final promise into the quiet. "I won't let you down, Allegra. I swear." The next morning dawned bright and bristling with a sort of electric thrill. Rumors had swept the gilded circus overnight. A private show for some of the wealthiest patrons was scheduled at a swanky desert estate outside the city. It was all arranged at the last second, clearly one of Nikolai Orlov's big-money backroom deals. The troupe scrambled to tear down their polished tents along the coastal plaza, loading everything onto transport trucks while the audience seats were still warm. Arya Fontaine's shoulders tensed as she helped pack props under Camilla's watchful eye. A desert estate, far from prying city eyes. The potential for something sinister loomed in every creak of the loading crates. She kept her head down, assisting with illusions, quietly praying that the newly discovered documents, hidden away in Camilla's false bottom box, would remain safe. If Nikolai even suspected they had the ledgers, they'd be done for. By mid-afternoon, a caravan of vehicles set off from the seaside city. Gleaming black SUVs rode in front and back, carrying security personnel, while the circus's own buses and cargo trucks followed in a convoy. Zhang Wei gripped the steering wheel of one of the smaller vans, jaw tight, knuckles white. Arya sat beside him, adjusting the strap of her duffel bag and trying not to fret about what lay ahead. "Do you think Luke knows what Nikolai is planning?" she asked quietly, staring at the swaying palm trees as they left civilization behind. Zhang Wei shook his head, eyes fixed on the endless highway. "He suspects. He's not naive. But Nikolai's kept the details vague, like always. Some millionaires want a private spectacle, so we jump. That's how the money flows." Arya swallowed, recalling the huge sums in those ledgers. "We can't let Nikolai slip away again. If the show goes off without a hitch, he'll pocket another fortune and tighten his grip." Zhang Wei's expression hardened. "We'll stop him somehow, but if we rush it, he might destroy evidence, or worse. We wait for the right moment." She nodded. The tension coiled tight in her stomach. Patience, she reminded herself, just a bit longer. By late afternoon, the desert heat shimmered in the distance, warping the horizon like a mirage. The convoy turned off the main road, winding through endless dunes until a sweeping estate rose into view. Pale stone walls circled a mansion with arches of golden marble, its courtyard filled with date palms and ornate fountains. Private helicopters dotted a landing pad to one side, their rotors gleaming under the sun. Arya stepped off her bus, the arid wind slapping her cheeks. The grandeur of this oasis-like palace screamed luxury and secrecy. As stagehands unloaded gear, she trailed behind Camilla, scoping out the labyrinthine layout. High walls, guarded gates, minimal chance of outside witnesses. A shiver ran through her. This is where Nikolai wants his show, somewhere he can control every detail. Inside the courtyard, staff rushed to assemble a modified big top under the blazing sun. Local workers, presumably hired by the estate owner, helped roll out plush rugs and align rows of velvet chairs. The entire setup gleamed with wealth, from hand-carved lampposts to gilded stage platforms. Arya's heart hammered at the thought of performing a grand trapeze act in such a remote location while brand-new VIPs watched with hungry eyes. A low whistle startled her. She turned to see Luke Moretti approaching, dusting sand off his black blazer. Despite the stifling heat, he still managed to appear elegant and thoroughly stressed. "Quite the place, huh?" he murmured, scanning the estate with guarded admiration. "Opulent," Arya replied, forcing a small smile. "But it makes me uneasy." Luke nodded, expression serious. "I know. Nikolai's out there negotiating final terms with the estate's host. We're to perform for a select crowd. Billionaires, foreign dignitaries, top-tier sponsors. They expect a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle." Arya set her jaw. Once in a lifetime for them, maybe. They have no idea what it costs us to keep up the illusion. His gaze flicked to her, warmth and concern mingling. "You sound like Allegra." She used to talk about the hidden price behind the glitz. A lump formed in Arya's throat. I wish I'd been able to talk to her more before she vanished. "Maybe..." Luke gently rested a hand on her shoulder. "Don't blame yourself. Allegra made her choices. If anything, I regret not noticing sooner how deep she was digging." His voice wavered. "I might have protected her." She covered his hand with hers, a spark of comfort passing between them. "We'll protect each other now," she said softly. "And the rest of the troop. Whatever it takes." Their eyes locked, tension thrumming in the space between them. For a moment, Arya forgot the scorching sun and the looming threat of Nikolai. All she saw was a man as trapped as she was, desperate to salvage the circus he loved. He opened his mouth as if to say something more. Then, a distant bark of orders snapped them out of the spell. Nikolai's voice rang sharp through the courtyard. "Let's hustle, people. Our patrons arrive soon." Luke exhaled, stepping away from Arya. "We'll talk later. Stay safe." She nodded, heart pounding. Later, a promise that tasted of both hope and dread. Dusk fell with dramatic swiftness over the desert, painting the sky in blood-orange hues. Torchlit pathways snaked between decorative palm trees, leading VIP guests toward the finished big top. The seating area shimmered with expensive fabrics. Each seat boasted a custom program printed in gold ink. Wealthy spectators trickled in, draped in designer gowns and tailored suits, escorted by bodyguards who eyed the desert shadows warily. Backstage, Arya donned her performance costume, a sleek outfit studded with sequins that caught the flicker of torchlight. She flexed her arms, testing the harness modifications Zhang Wei had implemented. A rush of nerves coursed through her. "Focus on the act," she reminded herself. "Project confidence." Still, she couldn't ignore the voice in her head repeating, "This show is your only chance to act without drawing suspicion." At last, the drum roll began. Nikolai Orlov stood at the center of the ring to welcome the elite gathering. His voice echoed under the tent's vaulted canopy. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to witness the pinnacle of performance art. We bring you the unrivaled wonders of the Gilded Circus, tonight, exclusively for your pleasure." Arya peeked from behind the curtain, scanning the crowd. Magnates, dignitaries, and celebrities lounged on plush chairs, sipping champagne. Meanwhile, bodyguards lined the tent perimeter. The estate's host, a robed figure with a faintly arrogant air, sat front and center. "All eyes are on us. Perfect for Nikolai, and perfect for us, if we can pull off a surprise." The show commenced. Dancers whirled, flame eaters drew gasps, and Camilla's illusions coaxed delighted applause. In a corner, Zhang Wei hovered near his control station, disguised as just another techie. From time to time, he flicked his eyes toward Arya, signaling readiness. Luke emerged in full ringmaster regalia to announce her act. She stepped forward into the ring, heat pulsing under her skin. "Tonight," Luke boomed, "behold the breathtaking feats of Arya Fontaine, our newest aerial sensation." A hush fell. The stagehands hoisted her trapeze rig, hooking up the specially modified lines. Arya inhaled shakily, ascending the small platform that rose on silent hydraulics. Sand glimmered underfoot, and the desert wind ghosted through the tent's high flaps. Somewhere below, she sensed Nikolai's steely gaze, ensuring she dazzled the crowd. Or else. For Allegra, she thought, gripping the bar. In one fluid motion, she launched herself into the space above the audience. The hush snapped into applause as she swung high, twisting into a perfectly timed release. Glittering sequins reflected torchlight and bursts of gold. A sudden updraft of desert air made the trapeze sway, testing her balance. She pushed through each acrobatic move, letting momentum carry her in daring flips. The crowd gasped and cheered as she executed a triple spin before catching the bar again. A grin tugged at her lips, adrenaline surging. These are the moments that remind me why I love to fly, even if everything else was laced with fear and secrets. Then came the grand finale. Zhang Wei's new harness allowed a sudden shift in the rigging tension, letting Arya rotate mid-swing. She soared in a controlled spiral, arms extended as if she were truly flying. The audience erupted in thunderous applause. Heart pounding, she landed on the elevated platform, breath ragged, eyes stinging with tears of triumph. As she bowed, Arya's gaze briefly found Luke in the shadows, clapping with genuine admiration. Their eyes locked, an unspoken current passing between them, a mix of pride, relief, and the knowledge that a bigger battle still awaited. Nikolai, meanwhile, sat rigid, forced to show polite approval for what was undoubtedly a stunning act. He can't suspect I'm plotting his downfall, Arya told herself, chest tight. She descended from the platform, greeted backstage by Camilla's broad grin. That was amazing, the illusionist whispered, and the crowd ate it up. Good work. Arya tried to smile but felt tension coil in her gut. The night was far from over. Now or never, she thought. We have to make our move soon. If the plan was to confront Nikolai with the ledgers, maybe with Luke's help, they'd need to act before the circus disassembled again, scurrying away to the next secret location. Somewhere amid the swirling applause, Arya caught a glimpse of Zhang Wei discreetly packing up his gear, likely slipping away to confirm their next steps. She steeled herself. Showdown in the desert, she thought, recalling the hushed phrase Camilla had used. Here, in this remote estate, with the wealthy and powerful as unwitting witnesses, everything would come to a head. Her heartbeat thundered. Stay calm, Arya. The final act isn't on stage. It's about to play out behind closed doors. Thunderous applause echoed through the opulent desert tent, tapering into the velvety hush of night. From her vantage backstage, Arya Fontaine could feel the lingering rush of her aerial performance, adrenaline crackling like lightning in her veins. The final bows of the evening's show played out in front of the well-heeled VIP crowd, who rose from their plush seats to give the gilded circus a standing ovation. But for Arya, the real drama was only beginning. We're out of time, she thought, nerves raw. In her mind's eye, she pictured the hidden ledgers and Allegra's journal, all tucked away in Camilla's illusion box. Tonight, under the swirling desert sky, they had planned their boldest move yet, to confront Nikolai Orlov and ensure he could no longer hide his crimes behind shimmering curtains. As the last of the lights dimmed and the audience streamed out into the estate's courtyard, Arya stepped off the backstage platform. Camilla and Zhang Wei joined her, exchanging solemn nods. No words were needed. They all knew the plan. This is for Allegra, Arya reminded herself, and for every performer Nikolai endangered. Luke Moretti appeared, still wearing his ringmaster tailcoat. His expression was conflicted, relief at the show's success mingling with tension carved in the line of his jaw. Their gazes locked. Are you sure about this? He asked softly, voice laden with concern. She nodded, placing a hand on his arm. Absolutely. Nikolai has to be stopped tonight. We can't let him vanish again with that serpent-backed group funding him. Luke exhaled. Then let's make our move. But be ready. He won't go down quietly. A flicker of fear and admiration passed between them. In that moment, Arya realized how deeply she trusted him, how much they'd both risk to protect this circus. They found Nikolai near the edge of the tent's perimeter, flanked by two imposing bodyguards. The estate's robed owner, a wealthy magnate rumored to have shady connections, spoke quietly with him. Arya's heart hammered as the group approached, adrenaline burning the last vestiges of her performance high. Nikolai noticed them first. His lips curved into a tight smile, though his eyes remained cold. There you are, Miss Fontaine, he said, voice smooth as polished steel. And our illustrious ringmaster, of course. That was quite a spectacle tonight. Thank you, Luke replied calmly. But we have more important matters to discuss. His posture was poised, Yet Arya felt the tremor of anger in his voice. The robed magnate arched an eyebrow. "Is there a problem with the show?" Arya swallowed, stepping forward. "The problem, sir, is what Nikolai has been doing behind the scenes. Money laundering, blackmailing sponsors, threatening performers." Nikolai's bodyguards tensed, but their boss just chuckled. "Bold accusations. Do you have any proof?" He practically purred the last word, confident no one would dare produce tangible evidence. Camilla and Zhang Wei took that as their cue. They stood at Arya's flank, holding an illusionist's prop box. With a dramatic flourish, Camilla opened a hidden compartment, revealing the neatly bound ledgers bearing damning financial logs. Gasps circulated among the few onlookers who'd lingered after the show. The robed magnate's eyes widened at the sight of the ledger pages. Names, sums of money, all meticulously recorded. Luke locked eyes with Nikolai. "Care to explain why your personal accounts are funneling these enormous, unaccounted-for sums? Or how you made certain acts disappear when they asked the wrong questions?" For a split second, Nikolai's polished facade cracked. Rage flared in his gaze, and he shot a quick glance at the estate owner, who stared, scandalized. "I don't know where you got those," he growled, voice low. "But I assure you, this is all a misunderstanding." Zhang Wei gritted his teeth. A misunderstanding that nearly cost Allegra Fontaine her life. A murmur rippled through the small gathering. Some staff and a couple of VIPs who'd been slow to leave the performance crept closer, curiosity piqued. Nikolai's bodyguards stepped forward aggressively. One tried to snatch the ledgers, but Camilla jerked back, hugging the box close. "We're done playing," Arya said, forcing steel into her voice. "We know about the serpent symbol, your hidden sponsors, the secret accounts. My sister found these clues a year ago, and you made her vanish. Where is she?" An ugly sneer twisted Nikolai's features. "Your sister was a nuisance. She refused to mind her own business. So, yes, I had her removed." Arya's pulse thundered. She clenched her fists, tears of rage burning her eyes. "Removed? So did you? A new voice interrupted. He drugged her and kept her locked away in a private wing. The robed magnate stepped forward, eyes cold. "I suspected your ringmaster might break ties eventually, but this is bigger than any of us." His gaze shifted to Nikolai in distaste. "I allowed you to hold your performance here, but I will not be complicit in kidnapping." The entire group froze. Arya's mind spun, half in disbelief. Allegra might be alive. Before she could speak, Nikolai lashed out, pointing a trembling finger at the magnate. "Don't pretend you're innocent. You funded half those dealings." Panicked energy crackled. One of the robed magnate's personal guards clapped a hand on Nikolai's shoulder, restraining him. Tension erupted in shouts and scuffles. Nikolai's men tried to intervene, but more staff rushed in, drawn by the commotion. Camilla clutched the evidence box, refusing to let go. Arya steadied herself, ignoring the swirl of chaos. "Where is Allegra?" she demanded. "What did you do with her?" Nikolai spat on the ground. "She was locked up when she wouldn't back off. She got sick. I don't know if she's still—" He never finished. Luke signaled to a pair of performers who'd just arrived, and they stepped in, helping subdue Nikolai's bodyguards. Nikolai himself got pinned by Zhang Wei, who seized the chance to wrest him to the ground. Rage twisted Nikolai's face. "You ungrateful fools will regret this," he snarled. But Arya was already sprinting through the courtyard, a single thought blazing. "If Allegra is here, I have to find her." She wove past scattered chairs and startled VIPs, heading toward the mansion's rear corridors, guided by a half-remembered reference in Allegra's journal about hidden passages. Camilla followed, heart hammering. They burst into a side hallway, the polished marble floors reflecting their frantic silhouettes. A faint moan echoed from behind a locked door. Arya's chest clenched. With Camilla's help, she slammed her shoulder against the door, fracturing the flimsy lock. The door swung open onto a dimly lit room. A huddled figure lay on a narrow cot, blankets twisted around her. Pale, trembling, but unmistakable. "Allegra!" Arya cried, rushing forward. Tears blurred her vision as she clasped her sister's feverish hand. "Oh God, you're alive!" Allegra blinked, eyes hazy, relief washing over her expression. "Arya!" Her voice was faint. "You found me." Camilla hovered by the door, tears brimming in her own eyes. "We'll get her help. She's safe now." Footsteps pounded behind them. Luke arrived, breathless, carrying a ring of keys he must have snatched from the estate's guards. "Arya! Is she—" His voice cracked at the sight of Allegra, sunken-cheeked but conscious. "She's here." Arya managed, voice shaking. "We need to get her out." Luke nodded, stepping closer. Gently, he helped Arya lift Allegra. Under her sister's disheveled hair and frailty, Arya saw a spark of the old fearless performer who had once soared beside her on a trapeze. Allegra's gaze briefly landed on Luke, recognition sparking. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "Tried to warn you all." Luke's eyes glistened. "We know. You did everything you could." And outside, the estate teemed with chaos. Authorities, alerted by Zhang Wei's discreet calls, were already arriving, local police filtering in with flashing lights. Nikolai, along with several enforcers, was led away in handcuffs, protesting violently. The robed magnate, too, found himself under heavy scrutiny. The swirling torches illuminated shocked VIPs, realizing the night's spectacle had become a real-life scandal. Camilla supported Allegra's other arm while Arya and Luke guided her carefully down the grand steps. Paramedics, summoned by the alarm, rushed over with a stretcher. Arya felt relief slice through her fear at the sight of professional medics carefully lifting Allegra's fragile form. "She'll be okay," one medic said confidently. "We'll treat her dehydration and infection." Tears streaked Arya's cheeks. She watched as they carried her sister into an ambulance parked beside a line of squad cars. Alive. The word blazed in her mind like a beacon. After all the months of terror and uncertainty, Allegra had survived. A heavy hand on her shoulder made her jump. Luke stood there, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "You did it," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You exposed Nikolai, found Allegra, saved the circus from his grip." Arya let out a choked laugh. "We did it. You, me, Camilla, Zhang Wei. Everyone who believed in the truth." She locked eyes with him, heat rising in her chest. Without warning, a surge of gratitude and affection overwhelmed her. Life is too short, too fragile. Luke's expression mirrored her feelings. Gently, he folded her into a tight embrace, the hush of the desert air wrapping around them. For a moment, all the chaos, sirens wailing, reporters gathering, faded. "Thank you," he murmured against her hair, "for having the courage, and for not giving up on us." She hugged him back, tears prickling again, this time in relief and hope. "I had to see it through," she said softly. "For Allegra, for all of us." He drew back, cupping her face with trembling fingers. "There's a long road ahead. Police investigations, legal repercussions, a million questions from the press. But we'll handle it together if you'll stay." Arya's heart pounded, a flush stealing over her cheeks. "I'm not going anywhere. The Gilded Circus deserves a new chapter, without secrets." A tender smile curved his lips, one that lit a glow in Arya's chest. Then Camilla and Zhang Wei appeared, relief pouring off them in waves. Camilla scooped Arya into a fierce hug, eyes shining with pride. Zhang Wei offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," he said. "We all owe you." Arya shook her head. "We owe Allegra. She started this." They glanced at the ambulance where paramedics tended Allegra. Though still weak, she mustered a faint smile, lifting a shaky hand in acknowledgement. The bond of sisterhood, and the bond of the circus, felt unbreakable in that moment. A month later, the Gilded Circus set up on the outskirts of a new city. This time, the tents rose under Luke's leadership, free from Nikolai's oppressive shadow. Legal proceedings churned in the background, but the troupe had rallied behind their ringmaster, determined to rebuild a reputation for honest marvels rather than hidden corruption. Arya stood at the trapeze platform with Allegra by her side, still recovering from illness, but determined to reclaim her place in the spotlight. Together, they ascended into the rigging, hearts pounding in unison. Below, Camilla and Zhang Wei waited with encouraging grins. The crowd's buzz filled the air. Arya turned to her sister, tears brimming. "Ready to fly again?" Allegra's smile, though frail, was radiant. "Always." The spotlight hit them, and they swung out. Two sisters, two aerialists, free at last. The audience gasped at their daring moves, but all Arya felt was the pure joy of sharing the sky with Allegra once more. Her gaze briefly flickered to Luke, standing by the ring, eyes glowing with pride. A sense of vindication and hope burst in her chest. "We made it here, together." When the act ended and thunderous applause erupted, Arya and Allegra locked hands for their final bow. The Gilded Circus shimmered brighter than ever, stripped of deceit, buoyed by genuine artistry, and the love and loyalty that had guided them through the darkest shadows. In that moment, Arya knew that truth beneath the gold was the strongest foundation they could ever build upon. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription will show that I'm on the right path to bring you the best videos ever. Check this video out too. You're about to lose everything you've ever worked for. Your father's legacy, your dreams, gone. But wait, your only shot at saving it is teaming up with a billionaire whose dark past is directly tied to your family's ruin. Secrets are everywhere, passions run wild, and one wrong move could destroy all of it.